Hey Anthem, my name is Sean, and I have the unbelievable privilege of overseeing some of the mercy and justice work of this community, of this church, your work, the work that you are involved in by just being here every Sunday. Some facts about me: by profession, I'm the CEO of the Domino Foundation. By study, I carry a BCom marketing degree. And by life, I'm a lover of people. And I met Jesus in grade 9 on a COGS youth camp. I joined the COGS staff in 2009, and I think I'm the longest standing staff member here on team, besides Mr. Ronald Villakazi himself. And so what we really are looking at doing this month during Mercy May is that we're checking out what the scriptures say about mercy and justice, what God calls us to do, and how Anthem, through the Domino Foundation, is responding to those calls. So you'll see that during this week and next week, when Project Exodus takes the stage, we're mainly looking at Mishpat, putting mercy and justice into action, and how Anthem is currently doing that. And so hopefully we can encourage you along your journey of figuring out mercy and justice in your life. Possibly we can inspire you to get involved, or even awaken dreams and desires that God has placed in your heart to outwork in our communities. So today, all I really want to do is look at 2 scriptures, then unpack a bit about what Domino is doing in response to the scriptures, and then land on ways for you to get involved. Are we all good? Give a thumbs up, hit a like, send some love in the comment section online. And so at Anthem, our heart, our vision, our passion is to lead people to life. Life with Jesus, life according to the scriptures, and life to the full. And so one of the ways we do this is through deeds and actions, compassion and justice. And so Domino is really the hands and feet outworking this on Anthem's behalf. And so we really hope, it is our desire that through our actions and deeds, a revelation of the gospel will be made known to each and every beneficiary, and that they will feel God's love through an engagement with our church. And so 17 years ago, the Domino Foundation was birthed as the mercy and justice arm to outwork God's commands. And so the first scripture that I really want to look at is Isaiah 58, verses 6 and 7. And it says, "Is not this the kind of fasting that I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of yoke, to set the oppressed free and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry, to provide shelter to the And so the first scripture that I want to look at is Isaiah 58, verses 6 and 7. And it says, "Is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them and not turn away from your own flesh and blood." In Zechariah, the second scripture, in Zechariah 7, verses 8 to 10, "And the word of the Lord came again to Zechariah. This is what the Lord Almighty said. Administer true justice. Show mercy and compassion to one another. Do not oppress the widow or the fatherless, the foreigner or the poor." And so for me, from both these scriptures, it's very clear that mercy and justice is an action word, a doing word. In English, a verb, our good old high school English coming back to us. And that also that Hebrew word of mishpat is so relevant that John introduced to us last week. To treat people equitably and puts the focus on the action of doing justice and not merely the theory of it. And so how does Domino do it? What do we do? Well, in Zechariah, God calls us to care for the orphan, the fatherless. And so, stirred by the scriptures and the whispers of God and the ever-increasing abandonment rates in our country, Fairhaven's Babies Home was birthed with the desire to stand in the gap and care for orphan and vulnerable children, and care for precious children they did. Back in 2004, a little girl came to be placed with us at the home. She was about 3.5 years old, and her first 3 years of her life, she had kind of been bounced back and forth between her mother and her father, who had eventually then made the decision that they could no longer care for her and gave her up to her grandmother. Not much time later, this little girl found herself in need of a loving home and environment, and so she ended up being placed with us at the Domino Foundation baby home. And so that then, on an early morning in 2004, we met Jada, and both of our worlds changed forever. Let's check in with Jada, hear some about her story, and see where she is now.
Hey everyone, I'm Jaden and Gavin, and I have the privilege of sharing a bit of my story today. I have been able to be a beneficiary of God's mercy and grace through the work that Domino Foundation has done and continues to do.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for being willing to share your story and telling us a bit about it. So how did your story start? What's the beginning?
So at 3 years old, I found myself in need of a loving, caring, safe environment. And that's exactly what the Domino Foundation provided for me under Precious's leadership.
Same Precious that's still there now.
Yes, same
Awesome.
Precious. And so, I was in a loving environment with other kids that were also receiving love. And so it was a great environment to start my life off in.
That's amazing. And so, Jada, you were the fourth baby at the home when we started. You were 3, as you said, 4.5 when you were adopted. How has your life changed since then? So since leaving the baby's home, how's your life changed?
So after leaving the baby's home, my family moved down the south coast to an area called Ramsgate, where my parents took over a beautiful Christian church that had a private school called South City. I went there with my siblings, and it was so lovely to just grow there. It was a loving community. I made many friends. I was introduced to Jesus there in a more real way, so that was very special. And then afterwards we moved back to Durban, where my parents took over what was COGS, now Anthem. And during that time my family also grew. My mom taught me and my 6 siblings. I have a sister and 5 brothers. One of them is also adopted from the Domino Babies home. So that was really cool. So my mom taught me through up to high school. And then in high school, I started learning through Cambridge online. And then last year, November of 2020, I matriculated.
Woo! Nailed it. Amazing.
Yes.
Amazing, Jada. Congratulations. That's so exciting.
Thank you. So now I'm working here at Anthem as an intern under Nick Saliers. It has been such an amazing, growing experience just to learn and be part of the team. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity and this time that I have.
I can't believe and I can't imagine the different possibilities. I mean, the reality of it's just your story, God intervening and a changing direction immediately, which is really remarkable.
Yeah.
What has been like a highlight or something positive that you've loved about this journey that you've been on?
I think it's definitely the ability to have a support system. I don't know if before being adopted and being taken into the baby's home, I would have had a support system. But I think going through matric last year, during lockdown, everyone's learning how to use Zoom and how to teach online. I think having a support system of close friends and family was very key for me to be able to matriculate.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing with us how your life has changed. And we're excited for your future and what more God has for you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
How incredible. I'm continually and constantly blown away when I hear stories like this. To look back and reflect and to ask myself, like, would all of this have been possible if a church community had not been stirred into action to care for her when she needed them most and provide a loving family? She met Jesus. She got educated. She had a family. And now she's got employment. Rich and Jax may have been the family that adopted her at the end, but she had a number of volunteers and staff cheering her on. She had a number of donors who had sown financially into Jada's story, all stewarding what they had in their hands and to rebalance this injustice and change Jada's destiny forever. But Jada is not alone. We have had the privilege of serving over 165 children that have been loved on, cared for, and placed in loving families. That's 165 destinies that have been radically changed through the work of the Domino Foundation and this church. These numbers have faces. We have Samuel living in Denmark, making snowmen, building snowmen with his family. We have Tando living in Joburg, who's currently still in school. We've had our first twins who have just turned 18 years old, and a large number of children who have been adopted into this community of believers that we call Anthem. And just last month, we had our first child fly across the world to the United Kingdom to be with his forever family. Building families restoring hope, and breaking the cycle of poverty. Religion that our Father accepts as true and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress. So, 2020 was a year, let's be honest. The COVID virus made its way all the way to sunny South Africa, and the world closed up shop and went home. But unemployment skyrocketed. Families who were already on the brink, living below the poverty line, were pushed even further into desperation. We at Domino, we have an incredible team, and we have incredible volunteers we see them as contributors and not consumers. And so naturally, they just threw themselves at the pandemic response and did whatever was needed to assist. We partnered with other non-profit organizations and countless churches in an unprecedented collaboration effort that I have not seen in my time at Domino. We had over 1,000 volunteers being boots on the ground, going door to door in communities to help families in distress. We were able to mobilize over 11 million rand from funders such as the Solidarity Fund, right through to individual givers sowing from this community, all for the benefit of over 30,000 desperate households who were fed throughout KZN. Now, the numbers are big, but for me, what I'm always amazed about, what always gets me is the incredibleness of what a simple, single meal can do, what it symbolizes, and what it can unlock. Last year, Lindo Kozo and his colleague Pumelele, they're one of our partners, and they were in the trenches with us in the midst of the pandemic. And they were on the road, they were going door to door, delivering food relief to families in need, everywhere from Mkanyakuda district up way north of KZN, through to Harigwala, and through to Mtunjaneni, some districts and places that I didn't even know existed before this pandemic. And we clocked over about 29,000 kilometers, what our drivers did. We were loading trucks at 3 a.m. And through burst tires and breakdowns, all to reach the last mile beneficiaries on the outskirts of communities. Now, looking back, reflecting, Lindo shares the story that kind of stood out to him. They were in Utakela, they had left early in the morning, and so they had arrived around kind of midday, late morning to deliver and go door to door dropping off these food hampers. And he arrived at one of these ladies' homes, and this widow, this old lady, she invited them in and said, "Come, sit down, let's chat." And while they were talking and conversing, Linda records that he noticed on the stove in her kitchen was a pot full of water boiling, and there was steam coming out of it. And so he said, "Ma'am, what are you preparing? What are you putting together?" And she said, "No, I don't have any food. I haven't had food. I've been praying for provision." So you see what happens in these communities is this lady would rely on, say, a spaza shop to have stock and provide those meals or those items for her. But during the first week of the lockdown, supply chains started to run dry. And so once all the stock had been moved, the spaza shop no longer had that capital to replenish before reselling. It's that kind of that trade game that takes place. And so those supply chains had run dry, and the lady had no access to food. And she said that in the morning she had been praying, crying out to the Lord to say, "Father God, please, I'm desperate, provide for me in my time of need." And she said she felt God say to her, "Fill a pot, place it on the stove, and when it comes to the boil, I will provide a meal for you to prepare." And Lindo was shocked. He had goosebumps. He was surprised. Literally 2 minutes before that, as the pot had come to the boil, he and his team had walked through the door carrying rice, maize, vegetables, and this lady immediately began to prepare the meal that God had provided. You see, God is building a bigger story. He's writing a bigger story than you and I, a bigger story than us. You see, God used us and what we had in our hands, in our case, it was a meal, to help build this lady's faith in her most desperate time of need. What was a simple bucket of foodstuffs to us was a beacon of hope for this widow. Our actions and response was a simple act of providing a meal, yet her faith in God was made real, her hope in Jesus made tangible, and her testimony of His goodness and provision will change the lives of people in her community forever. You see, guys, Jesus fed, and so we fed. He commands us to feed, and so we run a nutrition program. In a usual year, our 4 kitchens, we make and prepare over 1.2 million beacons of hope, a combination of sandwiches, soup and porridge, to plug nutrition gaps and prevent starvation and malnourishment. Our goal is to also break down the barriers to learning so that every child has the energy and focus needed to complete their schooling, and to provide crisis feeding to individuals and families in distress. But none of this will be made possible without the countless volunteers who make sandwiches every single week, or to the donor who stewards their finances to make this happen. Each and every one of them playing their part of the story to make this happen, stewarding their times, their talents, and their finances, whatever they have available in their hands. I tell you the truth. Whatever you do for one of the least of these brothers or sisters of mine, you did for me. So last week, John spoke about the difference between charity and justice, and how charity gives, but justice loves. And often we find that when motivated by compassion and acts of kindness, the charity of it all, this often leads to the difficult work of fighting the injustice. But that can only happen once a relationship has been established. You see, for Domino, we see feeding as the keys to the community, to unlock hearts, and to open the lives of individuals so that we can impact and work with them. Once we are in a relationship with a beneficiary, we are then able to dig a bit deeper, to question, to call out, to speak into and influence, but from a position of love and not from a position of authority or privilege. At Domino, our hearts are compelled to really understand the circumstances that surround beneficiaries, and then to work together to support, uplift, and lead them to life. We call it at Domino our Cradle to Career journey or story, but you can call it multiple things. You heard Jada speaking of a support system that her family provided and how that was instrumental for her growth. There are thousands and thousands of individuals that grow up in environments and situations that don't provide the support and guidance to live a full and fruitful life, that skip out on the teachings of the Word and don't get to experience the full life to the full. I want you to meet Nobushle. Nobushle, she lost her mother when she was very young, and she didn't know who her father was, so for all intents and purposes, fatherless. He had left. She grew up with her 4 cousins being cared for by her gogo, and her gogo was uneducated, unemployed, and living off social grants. And so let's hear from Nobushle herself and see where she is today. So Nobushle, who's Nobushle? Who is she? Where did she grow up? How was your childhood?
I'm Nobu Kenjovo. I am from Amawoti, a township just outside Durban, a township where there's a high percentage of crime, child-headed homes, poverty, alcoholism, abuse, gender-based violence. I grew up with my grandmother and my 4 cousins. My mother passed away when I was doing grade 3, and I never had a relationship with my father. So that's how I moved to my grandmother's house, where it was just me and my 4 cousins. And yeah, because my grandmother was old, she couldn't work, so we lived off social grants. So in a situation like that, or in a township like that, you don't actually have dreams because you are not inspired by anyone, because everyone is just living off their social grant. They do not have dreams, and there isn't any dream that is a reality. So I wasn't inspired to be much. Yes.
Yo, quite hectic.
Yeah, that's the reality of some people out there. Yeah.
Lots. Okay, and when then did you meet Domino, or I assume back then in Ndlela?
Oh yeah, I met Domino through Judy Carter. She had a back-to-school program at school, which was offering orphaned kids uniforms. So they'll provide a uniform for you from head to toe. Toughest shoes, a brand new uniform. And then, when you know what a new uniform does to a child's confidence. And then I was confident to go to school and then stay in school and just enjoy being in school, because I am like the other kids now. I've got a new uniform and yeah, I feel brand new. Yes, yeah. And then I was also introduced to a life skills program that was started when I was in grade 7. That life skills program was it was mainly a girls club and a boys club, and we also learned that we are special, unique, and irreplaceable, irregardless of whether you are from Amaoti. There's so much more to life. There's so much more than just what you see, and you can actually be able to achieve those. That life skills program taught me a lot. It also taught me to be a God-fearing person, because when you fear God, there are some things that you will not participate in, because the body is the temple of God, and you're like, no, I don't think my Lord will like this. So, yeah. Yes.
So that was Boys and Girls Club, part of the Life Skills program. That's grades
Yes.
4 to kind of grade 7.
Yes.
And then in Girls Club, grade 8 to grade 11.
Yeah.
And so what's since then? How has your life changed since then? What was next for Nobukle?
Matriculates with 4 distinctions.
Amazing.
Yes.
Amazing.
And yeah, now the next step was varsity. So imagine a person coming from this township and who has dreams of varsity. How can you even afford such when you are living off a social grant? So after applying through the CAO form, my teacher actually paid for the application. And so I got offers because I got 4 A's. So I was definitely, the universities were taking me. And then there was the issue now of accepting the offer, because when you apply through the CAO, you actually have to accept the offer at an institution, and you actually have to pay about, I think it's 250. That was the issue. Because now my grandmother, remember I told you that my grandmother was not working and living off social grants. And now when I asked the money, she was like, we do not have that much money. You know, we do not have that. And I was like, I cried for 2 days straight, because I was like, okay, now this is it. I'm not going to achieve my dream. So yeah, I was like, okay, my life is over now, because this means that the first plan that I had of being maybe a maid or working in the security or a checkers was actually the reality that I was going to get.
So from that time that you had to pay, you were stressed, you had days of worrying if you were actually going to study.
Yeah.
What did your principal do after that? What significant happened after that?
Well, actually, my principal, Gugu Mapumulo, just said to us, called us in and told us that there is an opportunity of 3 girls who performed very well to get a tertiary bursary. And luckily I was part of those 3 girls. And it was the Domino bursary, skills development, and that's how I got the bursary, and I was part of it. It paid for my studies from undergraduate, from first year till the 4th year. And even now, I'm doing my honors in curriculum studies. It's still paying for me. Yes.
That's amazing. And so, just finally, I guess, where are you now? Where's Nobukle in 2021? Where we're at?
Well, in 2021, I am part of the people of the change agents who brought change in my life.
Woo!
I'm also a change agent now. I'm a skills development coordinator. I also bring back to the community. I help children. I help people get bursaries. And yeah, it's been absolutely a pleasure, and I'm delighted to work here. And also, I think this is just God's way of putting me in a place where I can help other people, because now I'm actually a beacon of hope. Even when I'm walking around or in a taxi, people are asking me, where can I get this? Where can I get this? And that's the culture that I like to see in Amaoti, seeing people being more aware of their education, more influenced by education, and actually seeing that it is important to get your child through a ECD that's going to develop them through school and also supporting them. So that's what I like to see.
Incredible.
Yes.
Incredible, Nobukle.
Yes, thank
We
you.
are so excited to have you on team. We're so excited for your
Thank
future.
you. Yes.
And we're so excited to see what amazing things God does with you
Yes.
here at the Domino Foundation. So thank
Thank
you
you.
for being brave. Thank you for sharing your story. Thanks for sitting down with me to chat about it.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you.
This is one. This is one individual whose life was radically changed when she met a good and faithful servant, Judy Carter, who supported her through primary school. Nobu was again supported by the Life Skills program, who diligently taught godly principles so that each and every student would know that they are loved, that they are special, unique, and irreplaceable. Finally, equipped with hope and excitement about a future beyond her circumstance, the hope that Jesus brings, really, the skills program was able to step in again and support Nobu through tertiary level education, which so often individuals miss out on. So why do we tell these stories? Why showcase these testimonies of lives being impacted and changed? Because we are all God's hands and feet. We are all called to act mercifully and to administer justice. No one is excluded, and everyone has a gift to offer. So, two big things for me that I've learned over my time at Domino is that one, God blesses obedience. So obedience to His scriptures, His whispers, His promptings, His convictions. And God blesses stewardship. So blessing what you have at your disposal, the gifts that you've been given, and stewarding that responsibility to act. Take our bursary fund, for example. Taryn King offered a lift to Patrick, our first student, and a conversation and relationship started to develop. And he shared how he had a dream to study. She went home, had a conversation with her husband, Brad, and together they decided that at their disposal was finances that they could support his tertiary studies. Flash forward 5 years to 2001, and we have 34 Patricks, 34 students receiving bursaries, obtaining and achieving their tertiary level dreams. From an act of kindness, the lift, having an ear into someone's life, that conversation, and then believing the more of Him and more for Him, then following through on that conviction, that obedience, God takes care of the rest. He commands a blessing, and the miracles happen. Take Anthem Amorti, for example. God stirred in Tony Wilkins and Leanne Stevens' hearts to create oaks of righteousness by teaching godly principles to vulnerable youth, with lesson after lesson after lesson. As part of that Life Skills program, we have a Boys and Girls Club, and on one of the Boys Club's excursions to Blue Lagoon, the gospel was preached and the youth was saved. They met Jesus. What happened next was the parents started noticing the changes in these children's lives, and they wanted to get involved. And so Domino, together with funders and people in this community, employed a youth pastor to start leading this new church that had birthed, this Fountains of Life church that had birthed on the bedrock of the youth. A few years later, Fountains of Life Church becomes Anthem Amorti, and a beautiful story of reconciliation begins to unfold between a community in Durban North and a community in Amorti. Obedience to a conviction, the scriptures of oaks of righteousness, stewarding their time and talents, their social workers, God commands a blessing, and the miracle happens. It was never our intention to launch a church and start a church, but it was our intention to obediently teach the scriptures to youth. And God skyrocketed it. God has called us to act mercifully and to administer justice and lead people to life. So get involved, sign up to volunteer, make a donation, and change someone's life. Maybe you have spare time and you want to care for a baby or make and distribute food in our nutrition program. Call us. Call out to us. Maybe you have talents and skills that could see you teaching lessons in classrooms or making resources for literacy or helping to digitize our curriculums in this post-COVID era and letting our offerings and our programs be offered online in the digital space. Maybe you feel stirred to give financially and sign a debit order form for 250 Rand and be that make or break situation for a student's future with tertiary education. Come, talk to us. Email us. Email Esther at volunteer@domino.org.za or go to our website at www.dominofoundation.org.za and sign up and get active. In closing, I think, so a few nights ago, we had a Culture Carriers evening where Paul van Coller shared a message. He spoke of that story of Jesus' first signs and wonders, first miracle of turning water into wine, but he spoke from the servant's perspective, the servants that set up the wedding, and when Jesus gave the command to fill the containers with water, the servants had to carry the water, had to get the water. They were involved. And so for us, what that really showed is that the miracle didn't happen without that water container being filled. Yes, God can totally perform his miracles without us, but he chooses to co-labor with us, to work with us, so that us being the hands and feet, the gospel can, and revelation of the gospel can be made known to humanity. But he chooses to do that with us. But it takes action. It takes speaking. It takes courage. It takes stepping out, and it takes obedience and faith. Are you a water carrier? Are you willing to partner with Jesus, to co-labor with him on a miracle and leading people to life? Whatever it is, come and chat to us. Get involved, have a conversation, join the story of leading people to life, and start your own domino effect with whatever is in your hands.